In the time before time, when the world was young, and the boundary between the realm of mortals and the domain of gods was as thin as morning mist, there stood a kingdom that touched the very heavens themselves. This is the tale of Astraleth, the star-boned empire, and the catastrophe that befell it when mortals dared to claim the power of creation itself. It is a story of ambition that reached beyond the stars, of love that defied the natural order, and of a throne that was never meant for mortal hands. Listen well, for this legend has been passed down through 1,000 generations, whispered by shamans around sacred fires, carved into the walls of forgotten temples, and sung by bards whose voices carry the weight of ages. Some say it is merely myth, born from humanity's eternal desire to explain the inexplicable, but the wise know better. They understand that some stories are too vast, too terrible, and too beautiful to be anything but truth wrapped in the golden cloth of legend. Long ago, when the earth was still learning its own shape and the seas had not yet found their boundaries, the god Astraleth looked down from his celestial palace and felt a stirring in his divine heart. Unlike his fellow deities, who were content to rule over abstract concepts and distant realms, Astraleth yearned for something more tangible, more immediate. He desired to create not just life, but a civilization that would reflect his own divine nature, a kingdom that would bridge the gap between heaven and earth. From his throne of crystallized starlight, Astraleth reached down and touched a vast plain that stretched between 7 sacred mountains. Where his fingers made contact with the mortal realm, the earth transformed. Rivers of liquid silver began to flow, carrying not water but pure creative energy. Trees of gold and platinum sprouted from soil that sparkled with crushed diamonds and sapphires. The very air shimmered with possibilities, and those who breathed it found their lifespans extended far beyond normal mortal limits. But Astraleth's greatest creation was not the land itself, but the people he chose to inhabit it. From the finest clay he could find that had never known corruption or decay, he shaped beings that were almost divine in their perfection. They possessed the beauty of angels, the wisdom of ancient spirits, and the creativity of gods themselves. These were the Astralethians, the children of stars, and they were destined to build a civilization that would rival the glory of the heavens. The first Astralethians awakened to find themselves in a paradise beyond imagination. The cities that grew from their efforts were marvels of architecture and artistry, with towers that spiraled upward like frozen music and bridges that spanned impossible distances without visible support. Their gardens bloomed with flowers that sang in harmony with the wind, and their libraries contained books that wrote themselves, recording the accumulated wisdom of ages yet to come. At the heart of their greatest city, Lumen Spire, stood the Palace of Eternal Dawn, a structure so magnificent that even the other gods would pause in their celestial journeys to admire its beauty. The palace was built from materials that existed nowhere else in creation: walls of compressed moonbeams, floors of polished aurora, and windows cut from crystallized dreams. And at the center of this impossible edifice sat the throne of Astraleth, carved from a single star that had willingly given its life to serve as the seat of divine power. For countless centuries, the Astraleth would descend from his celestial realm each dawn, taking his place upon the starlight throne to judge disputes, offer wisdom, and bless his chosen people with new revelations about the nature of existence. Under his rule, the Astralethians achieved wonders that defied the natural order. They learned to sing new stars into existence, to weave tapestries from captured rainbows, and to craft tools from crystallized time itself. But as perfect as their civilization was, it carried within it the seeds of its own transformation. The Astralethians, created to be almost divine, began to chafe under even the benevolent rule of their god. They had been given wisdom beyond that of ordinary mortals, creativity that rivaled the gods themselves, and lifespans measured in millennia rather than decades. Why? Some began to whisper. Should they remain forever subordinate to beings who had not earned their power through struggle and growth? The first to voice these thoughts was Valian, the bright-minded, greatest of the Astralethian scholars and keeper of the archive of infinite knowledge. Valian had spent centuries studying the fundamental forces that governed reality, and his research had led him to a disturbing conclusion. The gods, for all their power, were not truly superior to mortals in any meaningful way. They were simply beings who happened to exist in a different state of reality, with access to energies and perspectives that mortal minds had not yet learned to perceive. Why? Valian asked, during a gathering of the kingdom's greatest minds. Should we accept eternal subservience to beings who differ from us only in the accident of their birth? We have minds capable of comprehending their wisdom, hearts capable of feeling their compassion, and souls capable of creating beauty that rivals their own works. What makes them gods and us mortals, save for the arbitrary distribution of cosmic power? These words, spoken in the shadow of the very throne where Astraleth dispensed his divine wisdom, sent ripples of shock and fascination throughout the assembled scholars. None had ever dared to question the fundamental order of existence so directly. Yet Valiant's logic was undeniably compelling. If mortals could achieve godlike understanding through study and meditation, if they could create works of art and architecture that impressed even divine beings, then what truly separated the mortal realm from the celestial? Valiant's questions might have remained mere philosophical speculation, if not for the discovery he made while exploring the deepest vaults beneath the Palace of Eternal Dawn, hidden in chambers that even Astraleth seemed to have forgotten. He found artifacts and writings that predated the creation of the Astralethian kingdom. These ancient relics told a story that challenged everything the Children of Stars believed about their origins and their god. According to the hidden texts, Astraleth himself had not always been divine. In the primordial age, before the current cosmic order had established itself, he had been something else not quite mortal, but not yet truly godlike. The writings spoke of a great transformation, a process by which consciousness could evolve from one state of being to another, ascending from limited mortal awareness to unlimited divine perception. Astraleth had undergone this transformation eons ago, but the knowledge of how it was accomplished had been carefully hidden away. The texts described an artifact of unimaginable power called the Nexus of Becoming, a crystalline structure that could serve as a bridge between different states of existence. Through proper use of the Nexus, any conscious being could theoretically ascend to divinity, gaining access to the fundamental forces that shaped reality itself. But the artifact came with warnings written in languages so ancient that even Valiant's vast learning could barely decipher them. The transformation was irreversible, and those who attempted it without proper preparation risked not just failure, but complete annihilation of their consciousness. Despite these warnings, Valiant became obsessed with the possibility of divine ascension. He shared his discoveries with a select group of like-minded scholars and philosophers, all of whom had grown increasingly frustrated with their eternal status as subjects rather than rulers of their own destiny. Together, they formed a secret society dedicated to uncovering the location of the Nexus of Becoming and learning the proper methods for achieving divine transformation. Their research took decades, requiring expeditions to ruins scattered across the known world and the translation of texts, written in scripts that had been dead for millennia. But gradually, piece by piece, they assembled the knowledge they sought. The Nexus of Becoming was located in the Primordial Sanctum, a hidden realm that existed at the intersection of all possible realities. Reaching it would require not just physical travel, but a journey through dimensions of existence that mortal minds were never meant to perceive. The ritual to access the Primordial Sanctum was staggeringly complex, requiring the coordination of multiple participants across several planes of reality simultaneously. Each member of Valiant's society would need to assume a specific role in the ceremony, channeling different aspects of cosmic energy while maintaining perfect mental synchronization with their companions. Any mistake, any moment of doubt or fear, would result in catastrophic failure for all involved. But the greatest challenge was not the complexity of the ritual itself, but the need to perform it without Astraleth's knowledge. The god's awareness extended throughout his kingdom, and any significant use of divine energy would certainly attract his attention. The conspirators would need to find a way to mask their activities, shielding their work from their creator's omniscient gaze. The solution came from an unexpected source. During their research, the Society had made contact with entities from other realms beings that existed outside Astraleth, Estarrek's sphere of influence. These entities, jealous of the god's power and eager to see his dominion challenged, offered assistance in exchange for promises of future cooperation. They provided the conspirators with artifacts and knowledge that could create temporary blind spots in Astraleth's awareness, allowing the Ascension ritual to be performed in secret. The night chosen for the ritual was the Festival of Stellar Convergence, when Astraleth traditionally retreated to his celestial palace to commune with his fellow gods, with their deity's attention focused elsewhere. Valiant and his companions gathered in the deepest chambers, beneath the Palace of Eternal Dawn, and began the process that would change the fundamental nature of reality itself. The initial stages of the ritual proceeded flawlessly. Each participant took their assigned position within a complex geometric pattern that had been carved into the chamber floor using tools blessed by entities from beyond the material realm. As they began to chant the ancient words of power, reality around them started to shift and flow like water, revealing glimpses of the infinite dimensions that lay beyond normal perception. Valian, as the leader of the group, occupied the central position within the ritual circle. As the ceremony reached its crescendo, he felt his consciousness beginning to expand beyond the confines of his physical form. He could perceive the fundamental forces that governed existence, the delicate balance between creation and destruction, the eternal dance of order and chaos, the intricate web of causality that connected every action to its consequences across all possible time. For a brief, glorious moment, Valian achieved what he had sought for so long. He touched the realm of true divinity, experiencing the intoxicating sensation of unlimited power and perfect understanding. He could see through time as easily as looking through clear glass, could reshape matter with a thought, could speak new realities into existence with a word. He had become, in every meaningful sense, a god. But the transformation that Valian experienced was not the controlled ascension he had planned. The ancient warnings about the nexus of becoming proved to be all too accurate. The power that flowed through him was too vast for his mortal consciousness to contain, and instead of ascending to a stable divine state, he began to fragment into multiple contradictory aspects of himself. Part of him remained the scholar he had always been, dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge and understanding. But another part became a creature of pure ambition, driven by an insatiable hunger for ever greater power. A third aspect embodied his accumulated resentments and frustrations, transforming into a being of spite and vengeance. As these different facets of his personality gained independent existence, they began to war against each other within the confines of his transformed consciousness. The other members of the ritual circle, connected to Valian through the mystical energies they had invoked, were caught up in his fragmentation. Some were torn apart by conflicting forces, their bodies dissolving into component elements that scattered across multiple dimensions. Others were fused together into composite beings that possessed the memories and personalities of several individuals simultaneously. The chamber itself began to crack and warp under the stress of containing so much uncontrolled divine energy. But the true catastrophe began when Astraleth sensed the disturbance in his kingdom and returned from his celestial retreat to investigate. What he found horrified even his divine sensibilities. The ritual had not only transformed Valian and his companions into unstable divine entities, but had also created a massive rupture in the fabric of reality itself. Through this tear in existence, malevolent forces from other dimensions were beginning to pour into his carefully ordered realm. Astraleth's first instinct was to contain the damage, using his own divine power to seal the dimensional breach and stabilize the chaotic energies that were threatening to consume his palace. But as he worked to repair the ruptures in reality, he realized that the transformation ritual had created problems that could not be easily solved. Valian and his surviving companions had become something that was neither fully mortal nor truly divine. Beings of immense power but fundamental instability, who posed a threat to the cosmic order itself. The confrontation between Astraleth and the transformed conspirators was not a battle in any conventional sense. When beings of such power clashed, the conflict takes place across multiple planes of existence simultaneously, with reality itself serving as both battlefield and casualty. The Palace of Eternal Dawn, that marvel of impossible architecture, began to buckle and collapse as the warring forces unleashed energies that had no business existing within the material realm. Valian, his consciousness still fragmenting and reforming in cycles of divine madness. ACCUSED Astraleth, of deliberately keeping his people in ignorance and servitude. You hoarded the secret of ascension, he raged, his voice carrying harmonics that shattered crystal windows throughout the palace. You could have elevated us all to divinity, but instead you chose to keep us as eternal children, forever dependent on your benevolence. Astraleth's response carried the weight of eons of experience and sorrow. You understand nothing of what you have done, he replied, his words causing the very air to shimmer with divine authority. Divinity is not a prize to be claimed or a power to be seized. It is a state of being that requires perfect balance between infinite power and absolute responsibility. I did not withhold ascension from you out of selfishness, but out of love. The transformation you have undergone will destroy you, and through you, it will destroy everything you once cherished. But Valian, lost in the chaos of his fragmented consciousness, was beyond reason. He struck out at his former god with power he barely understood, wielding forces that warped space and time around them. The battle that followed laid waste to Lumenspire, the greatest city the world had ever known, reducing its impossible architecture to rubble and slag. As the conflict raged, other gods began to take notice of the disturbance in Astraleth's realm. Some came as allies, offering their assistance in containing the damage. Others arrived as observers, curious to see how their fellow deity would handle this unprecedented crisis. But all were shocked by what they witnessed there. Fundamental order of existence was being challenged by mortals, who had stolen divine power without understanding its true nature. The turning point in the battle came when Valien's fragmented consciousness finally reached a critical threshold of instability. Unable to maintain coherence in the face of unlimited power, his divine essence began to collapse in on itself, creating what the ancient texts would later describe as a star that fell inward. The implosion of his transformed being created a vortex of chaotic energy that threatened to consume not just Astraleth's kingdom, but reality itself. Faced with this ultimate catastrophe, Astraleth made a choice that would haunt him for eternity. To prevent Valiant's collapse from destroying existence itself, he sacrificed his own divine throne, a crystallized star that had served as the seat of his power for countless ages. By shattering the throne and releasing its accumulated energy in a controlled manner, he was able to contain Valiant's implosion and seal the dimensional rifts that threatened to tear reality apart. But the cost of this action was enormous. The destruction of his throne severed Astro's direct connection to his realm, transforming him from an active god into something more like a guardian spirit. His palace crumbled into ruins, his cities fell into decay, and his people found themselves truly mortal for the first time in their existence. The golden age of the Astralathian civilization came to an abrupt and devastating end. The survivors of the catastrophe, no longer sustained by their god's direct power, began to age and die at normal mortal rates. Some fled to distant lands, carrying with them fragments of their advanced knowledge and the stories of their fallen kingdom. Others remained in the ruins of Lumen, dedicating their remaining years to preserving what they could of their civilization's achievements. But perhaps the most tragic fate befell those who had been closest to Valiant's transformation. The other members of his society, those who had survived the failed ascension ritual, found themselves changed in fundamental ways. They retained fragments of divine power, but without the stability that true godhood required. They became the Shattered One's beings who existed in a state between mortal and divine, possessed of great abilities but cursed with an eternal hunger for the complete transformation they could never achieve. The Shattered Ones wandered the world in the centuries that followed, sometimes using their powers to help mortal civilizations, sometimes causing destruction through their inability to control their unstable natures. They became the source of many legends in their own right, mysterious figures who appeared at crucial moments in history, wielding magic that defied understanding, then vanishing as suddenly as they had come. As for Astraleth himself, the destruction of his throne had not destroyed him entirely, but had fundamentally changed his nature. No longer able to maintain a direct physical presence in the mortal realm, he became something more like a voice on the wind, a presence felt rather than seen. Those who knew how to listen could still hear his guidance, but his days of active rule were ended forever. The ruins of the Australian kingdom became a place of pilgrimage for scholars and mystics from across the world. They came seeking fragments of the advanced knowledge that had once flourished there, hoping to understand the principles that had allowed mortals to achieve such incredible feats of architecture and artistry. But they also came seeking wisdom about the dangers of reaching too far beyond one's natural limitations. Among the ruins of the Palace of Eternal Dawn, explorers could still find pieces of the Shattered Throne, fragments of crystallized starlight that retained traces of divine power. These throne shards became precious artifacts, sought after by kings and sorcerers who believed they could harness their energy for their own purposes. But those who attempted to use the shards discovered that they carried within them an echo of the original catastrophe. Each fragment was unstable, prone to releasing bursts of chaotic energy that could transform or destroy anything they touched. The largest of the throne shards was discovered deep beneath the palace ruins, in a chamber that had been sealed by Astraleth himself in the final moments of the catastrophe. This fragment, known as the Heart of the Shattered Throne, contained the concentrated essence of everything the original artifact had represented: divine authority, cosmic power, and the fundamental forces that governed the transition between mortal and divine states of being. But the heart was more than just a repository of power. It was also a warning left behind by Astraleth, as a testament to the consequences of unchecked ambition. Those who approached it with the proper rituals and preparations could experience visions of the great catastrophe, seeing through Astraleth's eyes as his perfect kingdom tore itself apart through the hubris of its inhabitants. The visions showed not just the events themselves, but the deeper truths that lay behind them. They revealed that the boundary between mortal and divine was not an arbitrary limitation imposed by jealous gods, but a fundamental aspect of cosmic stability. The different states of consciousness existed in careful balance, and any attempt to force a transition between them without proper preparation inevitably resulted in chaos and destruction. These revelations led to the development of new philosophical schools, dedicated to understanding the proper relationship between mortals and the divine. The seekers of balance taught that true wisdom lay not in trying to transcend one's nature, but in fully embracing and perfecting it. The Order of the Eternal Dawn, founded by survivors of the Astralethian catastrophe, developed techniques for achieving divine communion without attempting actual transformation. But perhaps the most important lesson that emerged from the ruins of Astraleth's kingdom was the understanding that power without wisdom, ambition without restraint, and knowledge without compassion inevitably led to destruction. The Astralethians had achieved wonders that surpassed the accomplishments of any civilization before or since, but their greatest achievement had also become the instrument of their downfall. The story of the Shattered Throne became a central myth in dozens of cultures across the ancient world. Each civilization interpreted the legend according to their own values and beliefs, but all recognized the fundamental truth it contained, that the greatest dangers often came not from external enemies, but from the unchecked desires that dwelt within the human heart. Bards and storytellers would recite the tale during festivals and religious ceremonies, using it to illustrate the importance of humility and the dangers of pride. Scholars would debate its philosophical implications, arguing about whether Valiant's quest for divinity was inherently wrong or merely poorly executed. Rulers would commission artists to create works depicting scenes from the legend, hoping to remind themselves and their subjects of the responsibilities that came with power. But as centuries passed, and the ruins of the Astralethian kingdom were gradually swallowed by jungle and desert, the legend began to change. Details were forgotten or altered, new elements were added to make the story more compelling for contemporary audiences, and the deeper philosophical truths were sometimes lost amid the spectacular imagery of gods and magic and cosmic catastrophe. Some versions of the tale portrayed Valion as a heroic figure, a champion of mortal rights who had been unfairly punished for challenging divine tyranny. Others depicted him as a cautionary example of the corrupting influence of unchecked ambition. Still others focused on the tragic love story between Astraleth and his chosen people, emphasizing the god's sorrow at having to witness this. But regardless of how the details changed over time, the core message of the legend remained constant. The Shattered Throne of Astraleth served as a reminder that every choice carried consequences, that power and responsibility were inseparably linked, and that the greatest achievements were often built upon foundations that contained the seeds of their own destruction. In the end, the true treasure hidden within the ruins of the Astraleth was not the fragments of the Shattered Throne or the remnants of their advanced technology. It was the wisdom that could be gained from understanding their story. The knowledge that true greatness came not from reaching beyond one's limitations, but from fully realizing one's potential within those limitations. And so, the legend lives on, passed down through generations of storytellers who understand that some truths are too important to be forgotten. The Shattered Throne of Astraleth remains broken, its fragments scattered across the ruins of a once great civilization. But its message endures, a eternal reminder that the greatest power of all is the wisdom to know when not to use the power one possesses. The wind that blows through the ruins of Lumenspire still carries echoes of Astraleth's voice, offering guidance to those who know how to listen. The fragments of his throne still pulsed with divine energy, waiting for someone wise enough to understand their true purpose. And somewhere in the spaces between reality and dream, the Shattered Ones continue their eternal wandering, living testaments to the price of reaching too far beyond the boundaries of mortal existence. For, in the end, the greatest lesson of the Shattered Throne is not that mortals should never aspire to greatness, but that true greatness can only be achieved by those who understand the difference between ambition and wisdom, between power and responsibility, between reaching for the stars and learning to appreciate the ground beneath one's feet. Thus ends the tale of the Shattered Throne of Astraleth, a legend that serves as both inspiration and warning to all who hear it. Remember well its lessons, for in every age there are those who seek to transcend their limitations without understanding their purpose, who reach for power without accepting responsibility, who mistake ambition for wisdom. The throne remains shattered, but the choice of how to interpret its fragments belongs to each generation anew.